Hi, I'm Alexis from Living Energy Lights. I am 53 years old. I've had calluses on my hands since I was 6 years old. I've worked in the building trade for many years. I've worked repairing industrial machinery of all kinds, and I've worked a lot with renewable energy. About 12 years ago, some friends and I got together and we tried to build a farm, a community that runs without fossil fuel. If you look behind me, you can see these piles of broken solar equipment. This is a standard solar equipment setup like you see at Guildbrook Farm. This stuff dates back to the 1990s. What happens is people want to go off grid and they've got all their appliances. They go to the solar equipment dealers and they get sold this big battery bank, all of these inverters and control panels. There's your pile of solar panels back there. This equipment will cost you about $1,000 to $2,000 a year to maintain. They're not truthful with you about how long those batteries last, how often you have to replace them. So what happens is people throw this stuff away. They go through one or two or three battery replacements and they're done. They just get rid of it. We've got this pile here. We have other equipment that we're repurposing. The model that we've developed at Living Energy Farm that we're now marketing through Living Energy Lights allows you to have a hot shower, drink a cold beverage out of a refrigerator, surf the internet all night long, live in a warm house, do humidity control. You can do all of that at near zero annual maintenance cost. You simply have to set it up differently. We call it a DC microgrid. It works. It's not some big sales scam. It works great. We're going to explain it to you. You don't want this. You don't want to be paying for all these big cables, all those panels, all this control equipment and throw it away in a few years. You don't want to do that. You don't want to live as a slave to the power companies for the rest of your life either. There's a better way. We're going to show you how to do it.
So what is getting continuous power right now is going to be our refrigerator, our internet router, and also our outlets for things such as our wall warts, where we are charging, say, our phones at any time that we need them charged. Those are the only things that we have on at any time.
So one of the mistakes people make in trying to build off-grid systems is they think they're going to take their old appliances, get the big inverter, the big battery set, and run their appliances. That is a huge mistake, especially when it comes to a refrigerator. If you take a normal refrigerator, even a high efficiency refrigerator, and you try to run it 24/7 on an inverter battery setup, it's going to kill you money-wise. You're going to have those big battery banks. It's going to cost you $1,000, $2,000 a year in battery replacement. You don't want to go that way. This particular fridge is made by Sundancer. Has very thick walls on it. This is their DDR165. Has a DC motor on it, runs 10 to 45 volts. We've been using this fridge for years. It works great. Basically what happens, you can hook it to any PV panel above 120 watts. So at 10 to 45 volts, you got a wide range of which panel you can use. It chills down during the day on sunny days, and because it's so well insulated, we keep a good pile of food in there, thermal mass, stays cold. We never even think about it. We don't think about it, monitoring it or taking care of it. We just use it like a fridge. We keep stuff we want long-term down in the bottom, keep the veggies right up in the top, and then it's running straight off the PV panel and not through the batteries. That is the smart way to run a fridge. The operating cost on this fridge is zero. Costs you nothing once you install it. It runs every day, not costing you a nickel.
First thing would be our water pump, and this has an initial surge or draw of up to about 15 amps. So when that pump kicks on, that surges the system, and it's a really heavy load for this system. That means we need to be very careful as to how we use water. It's not something that most people think about when living on the grid. So for example, how does that play out in our everyday life? Well, for our showers, we don't run the shower continuously. We take what is called a Navy shower, or even a German shower, where you turn on the water, you get wet, turn it off, soap up, and then you turn it back on to rinse off. Things such as our washing machine. When our washing machine is running, nothing else is running. Things such as our toilet. We go with us by the saying, if it's yellow, let it mellow. We wait a few times before we flush the toilet. That way we're not running that water pump all the time.
All right, so one of the issues off-grid is that you need water, especially if you're in a rural area. The big motors, pump motor, can be a big load. And you end up having to spend thousands of dollars on a big inverter, big battery bank to support that pump. So this came off of a solar system. It's a regular AC pump. It cost about $45,000 worth of hardware to support that AC pump so you can come home and take a shower at night. Well, here's your answer that's a whole lot smarter. It's a DC pump. This particular pump was made by Grundfos. The pumps that make, the companies that make DC pumps are Grundfos, Lorentz. Those are both German. American companies include Sun Pumps, one called Robeson, Chinese company Helical. So there's a bunch of different companies out there. So we run a pump like this. This is a helical rotor pump. It will give you full pressure performance, even in really cloudy weather. And then we simply have a larger storage tank. Instead of having a tiny little tank, we have the bigger tank. You saw me in the bathtub over there. These are the storage tanks. We've got a couple of these. It means I get to take showers as long as I want. On a cloudy day, I can still fill the bathtub up with hot water and take a big luxurious bath. You know, in the wintertime, we do truthfully run out of hot water occasionally, but we've got a wood backup system. We fired that, I think, 7 times in the last year. So for the other, all the other days, we've got me and 8 or 9 or 10 other people taking baths and showers when we want to, more or less, all solar powered. But it's done with a pump that runs straight off the PV panels, not through an inverter, not through a battery set. You need to take an intelligent approach, a smart approach, a well-planned approach. You can't just go out and buy a big electrical system and expect that's going to solve all your problems. It's going to be expensive. It's going to cost you $1,000, $2,000 a year to be replacing those batteries. You don't want the big inverters to try to run a well pump. What you want to do is get a DC pump, put that in the well, run straight off the solar panels. And instead of trying to run the pump when you're taking a shower or bath, you want to get larger storage tanks. Those are not free, but the difference is the batteries wear out in a few years. A storage tank will last as long as you live. On the East Coast, we have somewhat more acidic water, so you want fiber wound storage tanks, not steel storage tanks. So those are going to cost you some hundreds of dollars, but you get the storage tanks. So it's cold right now. It's about 40 degrees. It's a cloudy day. We collected heat yesterday with our solar hot water system. That's a flat plate system. It's not all that cheap, but it lasts a lifetime. So you got your DC pump. When the sun's out, you pump your water into your storage tanks. The solar hot water system comes on when the sun's out. There's something called an LCID pump. That's a company out of Florida. It doesn't need any computers, no controllers, nothing. It just runs during the day, takes the heat out of your solar collectors, puts it in your storage tank. So even on a cold, cloudy day, I'm not taking a Navy shower. I'm taking a big hot bath on a cold, cloudy day. From the heat I collected yesterday, from the water I collected yesterday, we got 10 people living on the system we have. I get to take a shower anytime I want, as long as I want, year-round. We do have a wood backup system, but we don't fire it but 6 or 7 times a year, and maybe January, February. All the rest of the year, we're running on solar. Solar pumped water, stored heat. That's how we do it, and it works much, much better than trying to have a big electric system. You can even do a batch collector. That's really simple and cheap, although that's not going to give you good hot water in the wintertime. But there's a lot of ways to do it. What you don't want to do is get that big electric system. You want to do it smarter than that. Thanks for coming by.
And finally, the last thing that we run part of the time would be power tools. Now, power tools are something that we can run off of our solar system, but again, only when that's the only thing that is running, and it really depends on the amps.
See, I do have an angle grinder. That's that.
So the big mistake, again, that everybody makes when they're trying to build off-grid equipment is they want to take all their old equipment and run it off of a battery set and an inverter. We have a fully tooled shop or a decently tooled shop, and I'm going to show you 5 or 6 different ways here to cut rebar without a battery set and without an inverter. So if you look at this here bandsaw we have here, this is a metal cutting bandsaw. That's a DC motor, not an AC motor. It's wired straight to a set of PV panels. This is a 180 volt motor. You could do it with a 90 volt motor. So here we go. Here's our first cut. So that was done with sunshine, no batteries, no inverter. I'm going to show you another one. All right, so I would never actually cut rebar in a lathe. This is a nice old South Bend lathe, but you could. And I'm going to show you again. This is running straight off of high voltage DC, no battery, no inverter. Oh, got to get the switch. Boom, there it goes. Woo! And So we're running these cordless grinders. I use that around the shop if I got something really quick and small to do. So it works, you know, you can grind with that. You can cut that piece of rebar, but it's not going to be super fast. But it is a solar charged battery. It's going through those 12-volt cigarette lighter plugs without a big inverter system, without you know, the big battery set. It's coming straight from the PV panels through a smaller nickel iron battery set to the cigarette lighter plugs. But when I want to do heavy work, so this is a regular AC grinder, just a normal AC grinder. And you'll notice the switch here is taped. I'm not recommending you do this. This is not safe. It is strictly for educational purposes. But if I want to do heavy work, this is one option. I use an external switch. That's full power and then some. So any shop tool that you have, they all have what are called universal motors. This is even less safe probably because we've got to put an external switch on that. But again, this is not running through an inverter. This is just an old-fashioned, kind of a crummy, cheap little power saw. And again, we're going to use an external switch. I have a switch right here, but I'm going to go ahead and take that bar right off. That's got a metal cutting blade on it. Again, this is running straight off of a set of PV panels. It's 3 panels in series to get 90 volts, paralleled with another 3 set of panels to get 90 volts. So we got 90 volts at 16 amps running this power saw, no inverter, no batteries. That's 1/2-inch rebar. So I can cut through, you know, 4-foot sheets of 1/4-inch plate. It's about the same power as if it were running on AC. We're going to show you some more tricks.
Now everything else is highly dependent on the weather. If it's a nice sunny day, we can run certain devices. If it's cloudy, then we're running off the battery bank, and we need to be very careful as to what we're using and how we're using it. Even when the sun is completely out, we still have to be very careful as to what we use and how we use it, because it can overload this system and shut it down.
So another issue with these inverter battery-based systems is if you got 1 horsepower worth of tools, you've got to have an inverter that can cover that. With these direct drive solar systems that go around the battery, Living Energy Farm, that's our test development site for Living Energy lights, the 90% of our electricity never goes through the batteries, goes around the batteries directly to these shop tools. A huge advantage is that we can way overload the system. You overload an inverter, it shuts down. You're left in the dark, everything turns off. So we have about 1.5 horsepower worth of solar panels. That's our big system. That motor by itself on this big grinder, that's 1.5 horsepower. So if I was running on an inverter system, I could turn that on and that's it, I'd be done. We can actually overload our system 300%. We can put 3 times as many motors as we've got supply because the motors, the DC motors, float so well. Watch this. So that was only about 200% right there. I could keep going. I just don't have another motor right here to turn on. You can't do that with an AC-based system. So this system has a lot of advantages to it. Let's go. Okay, so while we're walking around with the camera, you can do all kinds of heavy work with daylight drive solar. This is a garden chipper. It had a gasoline motor on it. We just put a heavy DC motor on it. We grind up organic material to go into the biogas. That's where we get a bunch of our cooking fuel from. So this is a big fella, but it runs pretty good. Woo! So you'll notice I was not struggling to start a gasoline motor. it would take a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, I don't know, worth of inverters, an inverter that big to run this thing. It would take thousands of dollars worth of batteries if you're trying to do this through a battery system. And of course, if you got a gasoline engine, you're running the gasoline. We've got another video that we produced. I don't know if we put it up yet, but we will shortly, about us cutting firewood. I don't want to do that again today, but we can cut firewood as fast as a chainsaw. Daylight drive solar. Again, no inverter, no battery, straight off the sunshine. Cool.
Lights are something that we hardly ever use anymore. We have a lot of battery powered lights, some solar lights, even headlamps that we wear all the time. Even at nighttime, we hardly ever use our lights anymore, but the lights that we do have, we did turn over to LED lights, so when we do use them, it does have a minimal draw. A fan. We keep a small fan in our living room. That is something that we keep on part of the time. Do we need to be very careful how often we run that?
So, I have in watching the Guildbrook Farm video talking about these folks struggling to live off grid. They mentioned that they don't use their lights, they can't keep a fan running all night, and that really portrays a very misguided or just not a very good understanding of the various options that are available in terms of solar energy and how you can use it. So at Living Energy Farm, we've developed a much better system. Allows you to live with near zero maintenance cost, as I like to say over and over. 90% of the electricity never goes through a battery. 10% goes through the batteries. The batteries are nickel iron batteries. You see this little stainless battery here. That is a 74 or 75-year-old nickel iron battery. It's an Edison battery. It still works. You see that lamp? I can run a few lamps off of this for several hours. That's pretty good for an old miner's lamp from the 1940s. This is the solar kit that we sell. I just finished the last couple of days doing a test on this kit. So now this particular kit can have a 10 amp hour or 20 amp hour battery running 12 volts. That's nearly microscopic in terms of the numbers. People think that, oh my gosh, I got to have this big power supply. It doesn't matter how big your power supply is, it matters what you do with it. So this is a fan. This is actually a little homemade fan, but we have some more fans coming in. In the next couple of months, we'll have some good fans available to sell, because one of the problems with this DC equipment is finding good equipment. We're bringing it in. I was able to run this fan 30 hours straight in lighting in a cabin that we have. It's got a nice little speed controller on it. 30 hours non-stop off of this tiny little battery box plus a bunch of lighting. And if you're charging every day coming in from your solar panels, you could run the lights in a small house and a fan like this next to your bed every day. I don't know if you want the fan in wintertime, but you certainly could. In terms of charging computers, that's how we do it. 12-volt cigarette lighter plug off of these boxes. It works great.
So why have an HVAC system anyway? You know, why not just tough it out? You know, put up with the summers and the heat and whatnot, and use the wood stove in the winter. Well, I think one of the biggest things, and we've mentioned this several times before, that we underestimated in living remotely in the mountains in North Carolina is the humidity. And we will have an entire summer and most of the fall and spring where we'll have the humidity up around 90%. And when you have humidity that high, what you end up getting is a lot of mildew and mold. And we have a container that we have all of our stuff in. We didn't take very many things with us when we moved from our last home, but the few things that we did take are pretty much ruined at this point, just because of the mildew and the mold that has been growing from the humidity, because there's no way of dehumidifying that space, at least not without having a dehumidifier cord running there and dehumidifier running all the time.
Now, as far as humidity control, I mean, my family landed in Ebenezer, Georgia in the early 1700s. I've lived in the Southeast all my life, 53 years old. People all over the South live without air conditioning. What you need to do is ventilate, make good use of fans. DC motors are quite efficient. You can run them daylight drive. We got some big fans I didn't show you, but you can run them daylight drive. You can run them off the batteries, however you want to do it. This quilt behind me, it breaks my heart to hear people talking about throwing out their clothing. So my mother grew up a sharecropper. She sewed that quilt for me when I was a small child. I've been sleeping under that quilt for 50 years. I ain't going to throw out my quilt because of the mold and mildew. I'm going to keep my room ventilated, keep a door open, keep a window open, ventilate it through. If things do get a little moldy, you take them out in the sun, you wash them, put them out in the sun them out, and that works fine. This is what people have been doing in the South for the last 200 years. And certainly with our solar kits, you can do almost anything you can do with an AC system. Air conditioning is a little more tricky if you really want to have air conditioning. There is a way to do that, but I'm not going to talk about that right now because that's a technology that's moving along. But with fans and good ventilation, you can control humidity, you can control the effects of humidity without having to have big air conditioners. And trying to take a trailer or something that has, like they did at Guildbrook Farms, I understand they're building their house, but if you take a trailer and you just try to put this expensive electrical system into it to make up for the fact that you don't have good insulation, it's going to kill you. You don't want to do that. The building I'm sitting in has R50 in the ceiling. Is that like that much insulation? I can sit here in the middle of summer and none of that heat is coming through to me. So good design. If I got this little fan on a summer day, I'm perfectly happy. It's as good as air conditioning. It's better than air conditioning because the air conditioning means I can't go outside. So our systems work. They work great with zero maintenance costs. We like to keep saying that over and over again.
But I really do hope that, we set an example for anybody who's wanting to live off-grid or be off-grid or have off-grid capabilities or homestead, that you realize, though, that it doesn't have to be all one way or all another way. We're trying to make do in a modern world. We're trying to live effectively and efficiently in a modern world. And there is a way of doing that without having to completely give up everything and live in a cave.
Give you a very straightforward and honest assessment of what your options are in terms of residential energy use. For us, it's an environmental cause. Living Energy Farm was started to try to address climate change, but living in a modest sort of way or living in an environmental sort of way with respect for the earth on which we live happens to have a lot of overlap with not paying a power bill. So I want to give you just a straightforward, very honest assessment of what your choices are and what it means to your lifestyle. So if you look at three options, you've got grid power, you've got conventional off-grid power, and that's like Guildbrook Farm. It's like a lot of the systems I've installed a number of them. I've never seen a single one make it past 15 years or so. And then we've got the DC microgrid that we've developed at Living Energy Farm, which I think is a dramatically superior model from an environmental perspective and also, interestingly enough, from a financial perspective. So let's just go down a number of criteria here. Total power, you know what an infinity sign looks like? It's a number 8 laid on its side. So if you've got grid power, you have near infinite power. You do pay for it, but you can use a tremendous amount of energy. If you look at conventional off-grid, so Guildbrook Farm, they've got 5.2 kW, that's what they said. We're going to say they've got 4 users, they're a family. We have about 2 kW at Living Energy Farm divided between 10 people, so we have more users. That works out to 1/6 as much total power production, if you can see my 6 there, as a normal off-grid system per capita. You look at battery capacity, it's even more extreme. So for battery, it doesn't matter if you're on grid. You're not going to have a lot of batteries. But a conventional off-grid systems, 20 kilowatt hours. We've got 1.2 kilowatt hours at Living Energy Farm. And again, 10 users. That's 1/42 as much battery capacity because there's a voltage adjustment there. We're only running 12 volts. That's a huge difference in battery capacity. Cost per year. Well, with an on-grid system, I think the average power bill in the United States is around $100 to $150 a month. So we're going to say $1,200 to $1,800 a year. Of course, we know some people go way beyond that. Conventional off-grid, my experience is these things cost you $1,000 to $2,000 a year. We'll come in at the low end of that. We'll say $1,000 a year. Most of that is battery replacement, but you also got to keep in mind that $5,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 inverter is only going to last about 15 years. That starts to add up. All those control boards, the charge controllers. I remember Guildbrook Farm, there are 2 MPPT controllers up there. Those don't last forever. The cost per year at Living Energy Farm, well, honestly, it's really hard to calculate. Our PV panels last for decades. The batteries last for decades. Industrial DC motors last for decades. You almost kind of have to make up a number. There's no clear number. I'm going to say $50 a year. That might be high, that might be low. If you do it per capita, that's $5 per year per capita. That's pretty close. It's not far off. Maintenance. With grid power, you don't have to do much maintenance. So that's where grid power wins. It's got infinite power supply and very low maintenance, but you're paying quite a lot of money for it. Maintenance on a conventional off-grid system, you got to take care of the batteries. It's, there's some maintenance. It's not too bad. Same thing with the DC microgrid. You got to put water in the batteries once a month, once per month. Distilled water we use in our 100 amp hour system. We use about 3 gallons a year. So it's about $4 a year in distilled water. The newer battery systems that we're going to have coming out here shortly just have a little valve. So once a month you open the valve, About 5 seconds later, you close it. You got to do that once a month. That's what you got to do to take care of a nickel iron battery. The brush motors that we have, the industrial brush motors, if you run a brush motor hard all day long every day, you're going to have to change the brushes about once every 3 years. So there's a little bit of maintenance, but not a lot, not bad. Lifestyle, that's the biggest one. With grid power, of course, you get to have an indulgent lifestyle. Conventional off-grid, you adjust your lifestyle to what's available, which is the same for the DC microgrid. Just like they said with conventional off-grid, you know, we'll do some things some days and some things not the other days, but overall our system performance is better. We get to take a hot shower anytime, get to run a fan all night, we got a refrigerator that runs at zero cost, get to run shop tools. That's the one thing that I will have to wait for sometimes. Most of my shop tools are run on a cloudy day. I don't run them at night. Who wants to cut firewood at night? I don't want to. But if I'm running that, you saw that big chipper we did. If we're going to run that big chipper, I need pretty good sun to do that. If I'm going to run the circular saw, I'll do that in good sun. So there's some adjustment of lifestyle, but overall, I get to watch movies as much as I want. I get to do what I want. The real kicker here is the maintenance cost. It's going to cost you, you know, $1,000, $2,000 a year to pay for grid power. It's going to cost you $1,000 a year in battery equipment replacement cost. Conventional off-grid, DC microgrid, close to nothing. That's the real big difference here. That's why we like it.